Good morning. It is Sunday, not just any Sunday. It's one of the first Sundays coming up to the primary when it's only just less than a month away, and a good time to talk about what is a very important issue, and that is gateway drugs. Here's the issue: you go out and you vote, and all of a sudden people start telling you, "Oh, your guy voted, your guy won." And the other guy says, "No, he didn't win." And you go ahead and start thinking, "Oh, yeah, he won." And then you start getting civically involved. You've got to stop this. Voting is a gateway drug. I swear to God, once you get started, things happen. On one side, you start getting civically involved. The other side, you deny the previous election. It's all sorts of craziness. We need to start seriously considering how you vote. That's one of the things we're going to be discussing on the rotation today. I mean, I kid, of course, but it's really interesting how when things get close to the primary, people start acting crazy. I mean, it's crazy enough, but the fact that the primaries are all basically like family quarrels, and you're saying, I like this candidate, and your best friend says, well, yeah, but that person is obviously a mega killer and things of that sort. It just gets so weird, but it is good to know that we've got some good candidates coming on. It's good to know that Maine got their acting in gear, hopefully in a democratic fashion, better than the last time. And we need to get going, but let's talk about what we got going on today. First off, my name, Gary Stein, the political director and policy director and master of public health. And we'll get into that another time. I don't see Carlos anywhere, but I assume he's somewhere in the shop.
Oh, you'll see Carlos just fine. There he is.
Oh, there we go. Our deputy director and proprietor of Chillum Mushroom and CBD Dispensary, Carlos Jose Angel Hermida.
Thank you so much.
Who is also a candidate, I believe, for the governor of Puerto Rico when it becomes a state, or possibly the king of Cuba when we take that over.
That's the thing. Once President Trump takes over Cuba, it's basically just going to be like absorbed into Puerto Rico. So being that I have both an American and a Cuban passport, I would be able to be the governor of Puerto Rico.
I think I'd rather see you the king of Cuba.
I also like that rapper Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny, really?
Yeah.
You're not even.
You ever heard of? He did the Super Bowl this year.
You're not even Hispanic, are you?
I am Hispanic. I'm Carlos Jose Angel Hermida. Why are you being so racist right now, Gary? God, I don't. You're not Jewish, are you, Gary?
Last I heard. Although I'm not pro-Israel, but I am pro-Jewish. So just so you know.
Yeah, well, because you're not pro. I don't know if you know this about me, Nick, but I am actually a registered Republican now. You might hear some strange talk from back when I was in college.
There's a lot of people making a lot of changes right now.
Yeah, he also used to hang out with Augustus Invictus, but we're not going to get into that.
Carlos has a menagerie of former college buddies. One of them is our special guest today, as a matter of fact.
Hey.
I guess should I introduce Nick? Since
well, first you got to introduce Chris. Then you can go ahead and introduce Nick.
Okay, go ahead.
No, you do it.
Oh, I got everybody. So this is Christopher Cano. How do you normally introduce people? I don't pay attention at all when you're introducing people, Gary. I'm typically trying to like share everything on. That's why I'm quiet in the beginning of the episode.
And normally coming to us from Maryland or the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, yeah. He's typically from Washington, D.C. Big Cano here, executive director, the founders of Suncoast Normal here in this square right here, back in 2014. Christopher Carlos Cano.
Hey,
Thank you. Truly appreciate it.
And now the square at the bottom of your screen,
There we go.
Mr. This is a great guest for me, especially since I've actually known this gentleman for quite some time, right? Whoa, what are you doing there? I've actually known this gentleman for quite some time. Back in when I was 25 years old, or 22 years old, I moved to Tampa, Florida, in order to study at the University of South Florida. And while I was in the dorm rooms, I met a gentleman who honestly, he's bald now. He wasn't bald back then.
oh,
We're both bald now, but
I know time will do it to you.
It's a trend.
but and we had a talk earlier. I was worried that I couldn't say everything about our time in the dorm rooms together. But I had kind of like the party dorm. I was like just like the smoker that had always had weed, and I had another roommate that was just like always drinking. He was like 23 years old or something like that, and we just had the room that just everybody came to party. And one of the gentlemen that would come and party in our room is actually running for Congress here.
Yeah.
A gentleman by the name of Nick Zateslo. And it wasn't all partying with Nick. Let me just make that absolutely clear. We were having a great time in college, but Nick was always known as like the political guy, kind of always knew what was happening. He was telling me everything that was wrong with Bush at the time.
Back when we thought that was the worst it could get. Yeah, that was fun.
And just my good friend from the University of South Florida, Nick Zateslo, who I haven't really talked to in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a bit.
Nice to see you going and getting into politics and coming on our show and discussing your policies, man. So thank you. Everybody welcome Nick Zateslo for Congress.
Thank you.
Now, Nick, before you start, I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
Was finding Carlos's dorm room called Chasing the Dragon? I'm just wondering.
No, I remember the dorms a bit, but the main place I remember is from an apartment that we lived in later, where you were under us, and we all had an apartment, kind of like first floor, second floor, not no leases, but just happened to bump into each other again. And so we've been friends for a long time and gone through a lot. And I had kind of the drinking party apartment, and he had the smoke out apartment, and we had a great group of folks there those 3 or 4 years of USF back in the early 2000s, and it was a good time. And we talk about partying, but a lot of really good just discussions. I mean, I learned a lot from hanging out with that whole crowd of people that all went on to do really cool stuff. And it was such a great time and good group of people.
That was a really political time.
Yeah,
back then. I mean, it was 2005.
Yeah.
So
right. 5, 6, 7, right? Basically that last Bush term pre-Obama,
I remember, going to college and, protesting the Iraqi war. I remember hearing about Obama coming out and getting excited that, some change was going to happen. And I remember there were two guys that I hung out with quite a bit. There was, and I guess I shouldn't name them, but there was a gentleman by the name of John, who I guess I could say his nickname.
Yeah, John's random enough.
Yeah. And there was another gentleman by the name of Kevin, and I remember that. I remember them saying that we were all discussing our politics one day, and they were discussing about how they were conservative, and it was just so strange, especially in that apartment. And I remember, hearing why they were conservative, and I remember you really being like the liberal voice in the room many times, and really teaching us like what it meant to be a liberal, what it meant to really be a Democrat, what Democrats stood for, what change was really for, and just really the social responsibility that came with everything. So I don't know.
And that's why you're a Republican today.
Yeah, and that's why he's converted over, is a Republican. And I look at it much more as the system and being a liberal or a progressive or a Democrat or whatever the words you want to put on it. I think back then I cared more about that. Now I care much more about the policy and getting it done because I've seen how both sides are good and bad in different ways. Both, there's the idea that especially on an issue like marijuana reform and on these, that this is a partisan split. It's not, right? There's both good actors and bad actors on both sides. And, I think now I look at it very much as trying to get some solutions in that system, however we can, right? Instead of trying to fight it all the time, but also don't join it completely up, right? Use it where it's good, and then break the system when you need to get out of it. So I'm glad that's how you remember those times. I remember a lot about just learning the intricacies of kind of this whole industry and business that I didn't even understand was an industry or a business, right? I looked at it as very much just this illegal thing that people did, and it was fun. I enjoyed, I partook. I liked it. I have my medical card now, and it was something that I didn't understand the system of it. And you're one of the first people, Carlos, that sort of explaining that to me and started showing me that this is bigger and broader than just a drug thing, right? And that this really goes into a lot more of the criminal side and the justice side and the economic side and the history of it. And again, I used to think you were kind of the sommelier of that, and you really enlightened me a lot to those things. And I remember you used to say, you're like, I'm going to go and make this a legitimate industry, right? We're going to go and do something, and you did. And I think it's awesome.
I remember how crazy everybody thought I was.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine it. Weed was illegal. That was it, right? It was hard to imagine that being something that you could have a shop and open it up.
Well, there was medical had happened in California.
Right.
And, I was keeping my eye on that and kind of seeing things evolve.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really I don't even really think that I knew that I was going to be a part of the industry that early in college. I remember leaving USF thinking, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be in the marijuana industry. But that early in college, I don't even think I could have comprehended the idea of having a job where I sold marijuana or hemp or
right. Well, it didn't exist. Again, you're gonna have to build that. That's right. I didn't even understand that was even a thing people thought about right back then. And when I was in more of the college Democrats and stuff, and we were talking a lot about the Bush stuff and traditional legislation, again, tweaking the bills in the system, not trying to push new whole lanes into that, right, and opening things up. And that's a really brave, different thing to do. And it's much more where I am now, honestly, around AI and around data centers. A lot of this stuff is on that governance frame of how do you manage this, not just does it exist, but how do we deal with it? Because that's a choice that we make. And it's the same for weed and marijuana and medical and recreational as it is for a lot of the things I'm talking about now.
Let's start out by discussing your district and and who can vote for you and who can't vote for you. You're going for Congressional District 2, which is north of Tallahassee, and involves about 15 counties.
Yeah. So a little background on the district itself. So basically, this is the Tallahassee, Panama City District 2 congressional seat. It goes from basically Seaside over on the west end all the way out to Perry and down a little bit, but like Madison and Taylor counties on the east side, and from the Georgia border to the Gulf. So it's 16 counties, all are part of 16 counties. It's the biggest land size district in the state, but it's basically all of that middle North Florida section there. And it's represented right now by Republican Neal Dunn, who is he's retiring out. You might have remembered him if your listeners follow some political stuff. That he was the guy that Mike Johnson and Trump started kind of laughing at and making fun of and saying that he was dying in June and he was terminally ill. And Mike Johnson said something about, well, don't say that publicly. That wasn't public over at the Kennedy Center. That's the representative that's now still very sick. I wish him well. He's not. I haven't heard from him. No one's really heard from him, so I don't know the current status, but he's not running for re-election. And so that opened up the seat. And so now you have 4 Democrats in the primary, and you've got 7 or 9 Republicans on their side. And the cool thing is that no one has name ID. There's no, or interesting more than cool, but there's no big, former elected officials or really powerful, big influential people in the area. It's a lot of people who have different tactics, different strategies, different messages they want to talk about, but it's a real shot for somebody here to go to Congress that the whole system hasn't seen. And there's a few insidery people, but they just don't have a lot of name recognition. So it's a very fascinating seat on a kind of political theory level of looking at the history of these seats and the fact that it's an open seat, and it's the only one in the country that's like this that I can find.
Now you're no stranger to Tallahassee and to Florida politics. You've been doing this for a little while. Something else you did besides going to college, obviously.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tallahassee, actually. So it really is my home. I went to Rickards High School. I grew up on the south side of town up here in Tallahassee. And my family lives all over the region. So we're from Panama City and Shipley and all over the place. So growing up, I went to Rickards. I was in the IB program. It was a south side school. It was a predominantly black school. Learned a lot. I was in the drum line there, and I got to play with on the field with the Marching 100 a few times, and really, again, get a different kind of upbringing than most white folks in North Florida. And then I went down to USF and was active politically down there, just working on issues and causes, things like Pell Grants and again, campus politics, and just sort of figuring out what I was going to do. And I ended up getting involved with America Votes, which is a big kind of clearinghouse nonprofit where they help manage a lot of the other nonprofits that are a lot smaller to make sure that we're targeting different work correctly and coordinating legislation priorities and all that stuff. So we worked on a lot of things like voting rights. We got a lot of the stuff around the motor voter laws when those were being implemented and put in digital online registration and universal vote by mail and all that kind of stuff that now they're, pulling a lot of that back now. But we worked with Republicans. I mean, my job was to get things passed for our community, not worry about partisanship, worry about solutions, right? What did we get done? And so it was really interesting work. I learned a lot about what was going on. But then after working statewide in Florida with all those organizations and meeting so many people and seeing that, I realized one of the biggest problems we have is the technology. I was watching us spend $500,000 in mail and get $200,000 back in returned addresses, right? I was watching us, try to do all this modeling and targeting and messaging information and then just talk to random people, right? It's like there was this big disconnect between the data we had on the ground or the data that we were getting from institutional players and then what was actually working and what people were responding to and who they were voting for, had no connection. I got really frustrated with all of that. And so I spent the next decade or so moving around the country and ended up back here in Tallahassee. But I started tech companies and started working on the technology side because I started realizing how important that was going to be for all of our work across the board. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I started working directly in AI. I got a job with an AI research lab. I was on their board. I started building product around that. I'm not a programmer, but I got to hang out with the guys who build ChatGPT and understand this stuff a lot. And not directly ChatGPT, but those large language models and understanding that and started seeing what was coming. And that really pushed me into running for this office. So it's a really fascinating seat and moment here all across the board.
Well, maybe you can help calm my fears about AI.
Yeah.
I mean, AI it's a thing of a very duplicitous nature. Let's put it that way. I mean, we start out by saying, yeah, let's make some fake pictures. Let's take let it go ahead and create all of a sudden create a picture of me in an overcoat and doing strange things to young animals and things of that sort, and it'll do it for you, and you have some fun with that. And on the other hand, here you have a technology that basically stripes together all the hard drives of the world. And in some cases, those hard drives may contain confidential information. Like, for instance, there are a lot of research, things of that sort, medical research, that information gets put into giant data banks and things of that and servers. The question is, can AI get access to that information where suddenly things that were supposed to be confidential could suddenly be used by AI unknowingly? That kind of like when Grok suddenly becomes anti-Semitic. Consider Claude all of a sudden starting to put out information that's confidential, that's supposed to be health-related information and HIPAA protected.
Gary, are you shocked that the guy who's named after a Nazi rocket scientist built an AI that's anti-Semitic?
Absolutely not.
So some of it is baked in, some of it is choices, and some of it's random. And so you got to separate out where the layer is. But a lot of what you're talking about there is basically that's the governance layer. That's what I'm talking about a lot, which is, it's not an app. Chatbots, these AI is not a chatbot. It's not an app, right? It really is that layer into what gets put into it, what is permissioned, what is accessible, who has access to it, what was the action and result of that, right? It's not that we want to monitor everybody's chatbots. That is not the point. But the point is for big decisive actions, we do need to know what data was ingested. We do need to know what its sources were. We do need to know what decisions were made and what outcomes were there. And we need to have accountability around it. The point is we need to know what data goes in that you were talking about as far as just public and kind of HIPAA and privacy laws, 100%. But we also need to know what was used. What was that data used for? When was it referenced? What was the output that got put into that used that information? That's a very base level of the stack, but it's very important. I have a lot of policy on this. We could dive in, but you're on the right track of a really important piece of the puzzle.
Well, Nick, up in my work in the DC area, recently pushed a data center moratorium until Montgomery County, which is largest county in Maryland, which borders DC, can take some more look at it, because they got like 50 some data centers already in the state. And the biggest concern a lot of people have is our drinkable water. You got people here in Florida, can't water your lawn right now. Right. The electric bills are growing higher and higher, and they're not going down anytime soon. And now people's water bills are going up. So, what is the solution? We already have an aquifer that's severely depleted just naturally between all the concrete we've thrown on top of the state and all the environmental degradation. And now you got one side of the aisle saying, yeah, let's move forward with these data centers. It'll be good for us. And then you got another side is saying, hey, let's take a pause for a minute and reevaluate. Yeah. No one is saying no to the data centers, but I've been around. I've traveled the state. I've been to Polk County. I've been to South Florida, been to Orlando, been through Tampa and the Panhandle, and people have concerns. What do you say to these folks on the campaign trail when they're like, man, what the hell are we supposed to do with these data centers? Outside of the people like myself who are like, oh my God, it's all Skynet and we're all screwed.
Yeah. So basically the current generation of data centers, these hyperscale data centers, these ones that everyone's fighting. We've had data centers for a long time in America. They're your cloud. It's the email. It's your business banking data. It's your pictures, right? That's different. That's the hard drives that it just goes and gets. Those aren't so problematic. We've never had a big controversy around those, and they've existed for a long time. And we need those, they still exist. These big new hyperscale data centers I call them AI factories. They're different, right? The input is all that information, is your ChatGPT response. When you type it in, it's the business sending data to it. And then the output is that task, whatever you needed done, whatever information you were looking for. But that has it's a living thing, right? It's processing that in real time. And that's why the electricity usage is so much higher. That's why the water usage is so much higher. So there's a couple of things. I've been going around to county commissions all over North Florida. I think I've been to 9 now, passing these moratoriums and the dance. And so not only talking about it on the campaign trail, but speaking up, going to county commission meetings, sitting for 6-7 hours at a time with folks on the ground, helping organize these fights and get them passed. So I would push back that there are people saying no, they just live at the county level, right? At the state level, it's different. At the federal level, it's different. On the county level, we're pretty united no. I haven't seen one county, Taylor County, didn't pass the ban, but they're getting so much pushback now that I think they'll probably pass it the next round, right? The next month. Every other county basically has immediately passed a moratorium or whatever they can do the fastest according to their bylaws and their process to get this rolled up and stop these things. So people don't like them. Politicians don't know what to do with them because they're so fast and new. So politicians get kind of bamboozled by at $2.5 billion. You assume that means jobs. You assume that means that it's like a normal thing that you would get, and there aren't jobs, and it's not what you expect. And the size and scope are just so much bigger. The one you're talking Polk County down there, that one uses the same amount of electricity as all of Tallahassee, Panama City, and Gainesville combined in that one building. That's how much electricity it uses all the time. And when they say it's off the grid, well, it might be, but to do that, they have 600 hospital-sized diesel generators on site. And so you're talking about a different scale of a beast here, right? It's not a data center the size of a Walmart that plugs into our normal grid and it's just sort of sitting there. It's a different beast. And so one is to ban them as far as the current architecture and design of them and scale. These are not livable near humans. We shouldn't be building more of these. The other piece is they're basically the steamship engine of legacy technology. Right? Quantum computing is coming out in the next few years. Neurographic computing is coming out. There's a lot of new modalities and architectures for how these things can get built that are 90% smaller on water and power and size and give the compute back out. So I want to invest in quantum. I want to invest in the next generation and build those. We're going to need data centers with the coming economy and automation and robots that are coming out. But we need to have those be responsibly built so that they don't destroy communities when they come in and use all of our water. Because once the wells start sputtering, there's we can't just recharge that aquifer overnight. It is rechargeable. It can restain, but it takes a long time, years and years. And we're already hearing from farmers and from rural folks that are on wells that their wells are sputtering. I talked to a lady the other day who owns a nursery, and she said they're on their 80-year-old well that's deeper that they've never had to use. In 80 years, they dug it when the site was originally put in. And it's an emergency well. They've never had to use it. And like 2 weeks ago, they had to turn it on because their normal well is sputtering. Like, we're seeing this actively happening right now, and we need to take it seriously.
You know, it's bad enough that we sold off the public springs to big water,
Right.
and now it's even less water, and now they want to. You saying those diesel generators? I mean, that's going to drive up heat. That's going to degrade air quality. There's a lot that goes into all this, and it's like, but why? But why? I mean, you're running for United States Congress, right? Your national security is going to be an issue that you're going to be tasked with. Is it really because we have to compete with foreign nations on this issue? Or is this the advent of kind of like what you said, the robot revolution, if you will, which does concern a lot of folks? Because my biggest beef with politicians locally has always been over automation in enforcing our laws, from the flock cameras to the red light cameras. I'm like, if humans make laws, humans should be the ones enforcing them, not mailing you a ticket because the yellow light was a half a second shorter in red before your back wheels crossed the intersection,
Yeah. So two big pieces of that. The national security threat is real, but I think over sampled, right? It is over relied on as a reason that we need to build these out. In Memphis, Grok, Elon Musk's data center for his Colossus machine, they did the same thing. They put 35 big, gas turbines behind it so that they didn't have to permit them, and they're just on semi-truck trailers basically, and that's how he's powering it. Same design, basically build your own grid. Don't worry about it. When the local community sued, and the NAACP and a couple other groups sued on their behalf because it's a civil rights issue, but also it's just an economic and environmental issue, the DOJ, the Federal Justice Department, shut down the investigation and said, no, not on grounds that it wasn't worthy, but on national security grounds because they're integrated in with the DOD. So it's less of us competing with China and they outperforming us somehow. They're very comparable to us. They're a couple months behind, maybe 6 months. It's not enough to matter in that sense of a big national security threat. The bigger problem is that we've integrated our military into these so that the military is using the AI in real time all the time. And that's through Palantir and a bunch of other, Claude Code, Claude Gov type systems. And ChatGPT is now in it with OpenAI. So we need to look at it from a different perspective. The government's trying to make sure that they have access to these models for military use, not quite the same thing as worrying about China, like building better ones than us, although that's also a fear.
And AI did such a great job picking the targets for the beginning of the Iran war, especially that girls' school.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. I mean, that might have happened through human error too. I mean, it's a chaotic situation when you're opening a bombing spree on a country unplanned and with no justification. So that's a hard one to pick your targets. But in this case, it looks like that was just an old database, basically a spreadsheet that had that marked as a weapons depot or something, and it was 5 years ago previously. And so instead of a human going, oh, that's kind of late, maybe I should call my friend in the Iran desk, right, and confirm this and then get some updates, which would, that process, that slowdown would have naturally happened because we're humans and we have to email each other and talk. The AI did it very quickly, put it on the list, recommended it, and the person clicked approve, right? So there was a human in the loop, but they were clicking a board saying yes, 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 yes to a bunch of pre-approved targets that were all high recommendations. So we need to be very understanding. That's what I mean by human in the loop is not enough. We need actual governance around what data did they see. The person needs to be presented a portfolio, all the options. What were the minority opinions on that? Was there data left out? All those things that a normal commander would see, not just approve the thing that's recommended. We really need to look into this. And because it's all classified, we don't really know exactly how that's done, right? So that's the other big problem, is that we should probably declassify some of the how just on the front end of like, what is the information our soldiers and military are getting from the AI. I don't need to know the information, but I'd like to know what they have access to and how that's running through, or at least Congress should certainly have access to that. And right now I haven't seen anything showing they do.
Well, that's a big concern. I just, that you brought up, because I know Anthropic and the Pentagon has some beef of whether or not, the AI can make human kill people, kill humans without a human, making the approval, letting the AI accept all the data and the AI make the decision. And I mean, what we've seen with AI facial recognition is people, the flock camera data being used to possibly arrest people for things that they never even committed, or places they weren't, because there was some type of inherent bias in the facial recognition. And you mentioned about old data. I mean, that's, if you think about it, and let me give it a real example for people so they can better understand, because this war gets people in their feelings in a lot of ways on both sides of the aisle and across the political spectrum. But if you were someone from Tampa and you were like, oh my God, they bombed the Jewish Community Center. It was like, no, that's Fort Homer Hesterler Armory, right? And so it's the same thing with this girls' school and the weapons depot in Iran. And I mean, that is one example that can help drive it home for a lot of folks to realize it's like, wow, if there had been real humans in digesting the information, we could have avoided the deaths of so many innocent kids in the grand scheme of this, rather than it being just click OK. How many of us do that on a daily basis? Like where we click OK to the iTunes service. Like we live in a society where we're just clicking and getting the job done seems to be the issue. And I think we have a society right now, and we have an administration where there's a lot of people just looking to get the job done rather than paying attention to the quality of the work they're doing. And that is a terrifying thought. Like we have to be careful about automation and, and what that looks like, because it's not enough that, now we're looking at automation that's going to cost jobs. But as you add in AI into war fighting, it's costing lives too. Yeah. And I do want to pivot off of this for moments before we go down a foreign policy route and talk about, domestic policy too, because there's a lot of jobs that people are going to be concerned about. A lot of even, white collar jobs and human communications jobs. I mean, I'm looking like, wow, as I'm a lobbyist and, I've been able to increase my workload utilizing artificial intelligence, but it makes me think about, well, eventually they can automate this job. Maybe they could get someone to do this analysis. The AI can do it better than me, quicker than me. And, there are tons of people out there in different fields. I mean, that went to college. There are millennials and us that have built entire careers. I mean, my own cousin has worked in Orlando in the video game industry for many years. And we're seeing, because of the advent of AI, good six-figure jobs leave Florida and go to foreign countries like Uzbekistan for a third of the price. They got video game developers that don't need six figures. They'll pay them $40K a year and do the same thing with an AI model. And I mean, that's a scary thought to see, jobs going away out of this country with the advent of this technology. How do you protect our jobs in all of this?
Great question. And it's coming up more and more. Basically, look at AI it's not going to take jobs. It's going to take tasks, right? It takes individual tasks. And every time it can kind of zip a task up into software, that'll keep going. And eventually a business owner will say, enough tasks are automatable in this kind of sector, in this workday, in this project, whatever it is, that I don't need as many full-time people or even part-time people like doing that job. And then there are other jobs that are going to go away. Just like they're going to get all wrapped up. And one of those big, worries is basically if your job is almost all 100% on the computer, just in general, your job is moving files around, emailing, doing data analysis, phone support, anything that revolves around phones or computers as the primary vehicle for you to do your work, that job is very much under threat. And I don't really care about the details of that job as far as we can get into the details of, is the AI perfect at certain things, but at a scale, that's a lot of jobs. That is a huge amount of jobs. And in places like Tampa, the call center industry has been really recruited there. And there's a real fear that, you could lose hundreds of thousands of jobs in Tampa in the next few years because this is going to wrap those up. However, the knife cuts both ways, right? If the big companies don't need all of us to do a lot of work, that means that you don't need a bunch of people to work in your business. So the same way that a big industry can shrink staff, small businesses, I hope, will prosper more, because I think it's a decentralization mechanism too. It means that you can start that business, and instead of needing $500,000 because you need all the legal and marketing and sales team and support and all that, you can automate and not have all those people either. So now you and 2 or 3 friends and $20,000 can do what $250,000 and a bank loan had to happen last time. Right now we can adjust that, just the amount of capital you need and the amount of training you need, amount of help you need. Because it also means that the poorest person, the least educated person can now open a chatbot and ask good questions. And I don't care what kind of education you have. that's kind of the street smarts thing, right? Is that you know what questions to ask. You can kind of feel out when something is good or not. You can understand that a lot of people have that skill. And if they can keep that with AI and make sure that they can use it right, and we use it as a tool, then people can start to use this and prosper and flourish and build things that we've never seen before. That's the hope. And I hope that's the way that when I look at the governance of it, I want to always make sure that we can keep accountability, that we keep the legibility of what went into it, like Gary was saying, like we know what was used and what wasn't, but that we also make sure that people's lives don't collapse, because that's my big worry, is that we're going to start to see this trickle out of jobs, and at 5-10% we're talking about recessions, 10-20% we're talking about depressions. It gets worse from there, and we don't have any plan, right? We don't have any actual like unemployment system here. Our unemployment system right now is basically Uber and DoorDash. I mean, that's what people are doing when they get laid off, because unemployment's $2,500 over 10 weeks or so max in Florida. So when the driverless cars start to come, and the number one job in America is driver, and they're all independent contractors, we have a real mess on our hands, as far as that we don't have any more slack to pick up quickly. Now, at scale over 20, 50 years, are we going to see new jobs? Of course, right? There's all sorts of things that will happen in the economy over a generation as we see these changes come in. But we have a huge short-term crisis where we are going to have job loss, and we don't have those coming in yet, right? That pipeline hasn't been built. We don't have incubators. We don't have open access AI. We don't have a lot of things that we're going to need. And we're building a bunch of bookstores, basically, right? We're building a bunch of places where to get out with the information, you have to put your credit card in first. And we need to be building libraries and making sure that everybody has access to this technology. Everybody has access to this intelligence, so that everybody can build their next business, can get the automation and productivity out of it. And then that productivity that is commercial flows back down. We cannot let us just have $10 trillion+ companies and that's it, right? And no real economy below that. We have to make sure that we have people have money, that they have healthcare, and that their lives don't collapse just because they lost their job. That means their kid loses their doctor. I mean, let's
talk about the history of robotics for a second, because the folks who watch the show know I grew up in Detroit.
Uh-huh.
And I was there when the robots first started coming to the assembly line, and there were people who were making $20 an hour back in the 1970s, working in the factories and making a good living for their family, and yet they're worried about these robots coming up. And they said, "Don't worry, because you will be the ones fixing the robots. You'll be the one programming the robots, so you'll still always have a job."
Right.
Only now we're talking about robots that are autonomous, which means they're not going to need somebody to help program them on a regular basis, or fix the glitches, or change the programming, because it can change its own programming if it actually wanted to. Now, I want autonomy. I mean, my wife is blind. I'd love for her to have an autonomous car that could drive her someplace, so I won't have to. But I'm just worried she won't get there.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I see those autonomous cars and I turn the other way.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, is that it is both sides of that. The autonomous cars are going to come because they're better than human drivers. That's the real reality of it, is that they're safer than human drivers at scale across the board. And so insurance is going to force it, right? You're going to see this pick up, where to have a human only car is very expensive, and to have the more self-driving it is, whether it's automatic cruise control, whether it's parking, whether it's automatic lane assist, all these things that we have now, all the way up to full automation with no steering wheel and 4 seats that face each other and you're just zipping down the road, that's coming. That whole spectrum will be under insurance. Basically, it's how much insurance are you going to have to pay, and how expensive is that car to run. And I think you're going to see the market naturally move towards automation. Not everywhere. It won't be that they'll make it illegal to drive a human car, but it'll be a more and more of, like, I don't think my son, who's 6 years old right now, is ever going to drive a car in a normal way of that. Like, he might drive a car for kind of out in the woods, or drive a truck somewhere, or do something like that for something, or a sports car for fun. But it will be, his daily driver will probably be an automated car that just drives him around. And it'll probably be more like an Uber that he calls, right? He doesn't have to own a car that way. But those are all choices, right? We're going to decide those rules in the next 2 to 4 years of, like, what is that? How does that work? What is that regulated as? What do we want to do? Again, I'm just telling you the projections from like what I understand about what's happening in the technology, but that does not translate over to the policy of what is the actual policy. How do we regulate the insurance? How do we deal with this? What do we want? There's certain jobs we might want to keep as human. There's some we might want to incentivize to automate, but we should be in control of that, and not just randomly letting it hit towns and cities and states as companies make decisions and governments make decisions kind of randomly.
Nick, the more you tell me about what's on the horizon, the more I'm sitting here saying, let's burn it all down.
Yeah. I feel you. I feel you. It's a weird moment.
I'm sitting here like maybe Luigi was right. This is all just sitting in the pit of my stomach very badly as to what's on the horizon. And that's the thing. We've been fighting on the policy side with a certain thought paradigm for decades. And now everything is changing so rapidly. I mean, we were just talking about people being costed their jobs on so many issues. And in the grand scheme of things, I mean, one of the things that we continue to fight for here at the state level is job protections for medical marijuana patients. And I know we had some questions coming in from folks in cyberspace, and one of them they want to know is, Nick, are you pro cannabis, and can people count on you to advocate for legislation like the MORE Act when you're in Congress that will legalize it and make sure people aren't losing their jobs for being medical marijuana patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely co-sponsor the MORE Act. I am very much on the legalization of marijuana. I think that it's an important topic across the economy, across social justice, across, your day-to-day life of just what kind of society we live in, and whether, we are free to do the things that we need to do that aren't dangerous to us. Why can't we do that? And I don't like any time somebody comes in and stops or pushes people to force them to do or not do something that has no justification.
Well, we signed this international treaty, which really is an interesting, point of view as to how we fix. We're sitting here on the street corner, and some guy just flicked off a TPD officer as he crossed the street. I'm like, that is the quickest way to get a free ticket to jail. That is hilarious. I thought I was about to see if this cops gets out the car, we're about to see somebody get their ass whipped live. Sorry, Nick.
That's what dash cams are for.
Yeah,
it just got distracted. I'm like, that's an odd choice to stand in front of the car and flick the cop off.
You see a lot of weird shit in Ybor.
I had an office in Ybor for about a year, and it was a great time, but a unique experience.
And for folks who don't know, Ybor City used to be its own town. It's now obviously part of Tampa. It's the center of where the cigar manufacturing industry was at the turn of the 20th and the 19th century. And this is where it all goes down. You see some wild stuff. I remember being out here at 16 years old and seeing some wild stuff at Guava Wing. So.
And of course, Ybor City was the home of Victor Licata, right across the street practically, and a little bit down the block from where Chillum is. Where as the friends of the show know, there was a gentleman, 24 years old, who killed his parents with an axe, and it was used in the Reefer Madness movie as saying that it was cannabis that made him go crazy, when in fact he actually had a severe bipolar disorder. And actually, the cannabis his father was giving him was keeping him sane. And when that was taken away because of a crackdown in that area, he went bonkers and killed his parents. And that's Ybor City for you.
Gary, I've been meaning to tell you, I drove past the Licata house the other day, and like Ybor is being overrun with gentrification and developers now. And I got a little worried because I saw like 5 middle-aged white guys standing outside the Licata house, like with like papers out and like pointing, and like I hope they don't change it up, dude.
I mean, absolutely, because that's history. I mean, Ybor is definitely history.
But
it was history on a lot of levels, and that's a great story. I had heard that story, but didn't know it was so connected to Ybor directly, that the house was still there. And
the Tampa Bay Times is like responsible for like one of the first yellow journalism situations because of this whole Licata situation.
That's fascinating.
But I'm telling you guys, it was like classic in a movie gentrification, like guys with hard hats like pointing at and so it's like pointing at the house. I'm like, oh shit, fuck, the Licata house is gonna go down.
Yeah, they're saying we're gonna put the new stadium right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that would make sense why I see county commissioners and Carmines meeting with guys in suits and sliding envelopes across the table. So,
right,
but Nick, you've been involved in Tampa politics when you were younger. You know it's a dirty game.
I said, yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have to get too into the dirty parts of it. I was very active though around Tampa for a long time, both in University of Florida or University of South Florida, kind of college work, and then I worked on a couple of county commissioners. I worked for John Dingfelder for a while on his campaign out there, and at Taranchik, and tried to work for some good folks, building up something different and trying to do something different than we had.
Well, one of the things that I remember was working with you in the Hillsborough County Young Democrats,
Yeah.
where we were able to bring, Camp Wellstone to the Tampa Bay area and really help people understand, what it means to run a progressive grassroots campaign that's based in issues and based in connecting with people rather than, just staying on the phone all day and begging for money to rich guys, but actually, learning how to organize, learning how to also win a campaign on a budget. And I got to say, man, stepping out into what you're doing, the United States Congress, right? In a 15, 16 county seat. I mean, you're taking on a monumental task here. How do you balance that with just being an everyday person, making your money, kissing your wife at night and raising your kids? Like, how, because me and Carlos know you as who you are, and it's like you're stepping into a role where, I've even seen it working in DC. Like, the people who I know in Congress are not the characters they play on television. So, how do you step into this role as wanting to be a member of the United States Congress and balancing that with just being an everyday person?
Yeah, well, I think it is hard to be an everyday person and run for Congress or be in Congress. I think that's one of the big problems. I've told my friends and family and team that, don't let me get in the bubble, right? Just make sure that I still get good information from random people, from stuff. And to do that, we've really been doing these meet and greets. And so we've had over 85 living room meet and greets where we just tell people to invite their neighbors and friends. I don't ask partisanship. We don't ask for a donation. We just say, bring your friends and family. I'll bring some pizza and wine and beer. We'll hang out for 2 hours and talk about the country.
Pizza and beer?
And we've done basically 3,500 people in living rooms with that over the last 10 months or so. And that combined with normal outreach and voter, just basically communication that we're doing, has really been how we've been able to do both of those things. I'm very dedicated to making sure that I find family time. I've worked on campaigns. I've worked around things for a while. I've never run for office, but I'm not a normal candidate that way. And I made a really dedicated thing to say, no, I'll be home for dinner every night as much as possible. And I really strive for that. At the same time, with the issues that we're facing between the constitutional crisis that we're in and the AI basically build out and modern economy that's coming and all the things we talked about with the military and surveillance and all sorts of stuff happening, it makes it a little easier to get up in the morning and go do the drive, because the consequences of not getting either one of those right are so severe that I feel like we have to have people paying attention and doing that, but also not doing it in just a partisan, let's get a Democrat elected to get a Democrat elected. The point is to get somebody elected to do something and to find solutions. And that's really where I think differently about it, because most of my family up here, they live up in the rural areas of this area. I have a lot of family in Tallahassee, but most of them are Trump supporters. They're MAGA folks, right? Like they're probably not voting for me. That's okay, right? We got to be able to disagree. I don't think they hate the country. I don't think they're fascists. I don't think they're authoritarians. I don't think my cousins, who I go out fishing with and hanging out with, hate America, right? That's not what's going on here. Now, there's a difference between what Trump and the administration is doing, the policies and the things that they're actively doing. We need to hold them to account completely. But I think we need to be able to talk to each other, right? Neighbors and voters together and say, this is wrong. This is not good. And what I'm hearing from them is people saying, yeah, I agree with you now, right? They're changing their minds. I mean, this is a district that Democrats didn't run anyone in 2022. And in 2024, we ran a candidate who didn't really run much of a campaign. She's still in the race this year. She's Yin Bailey. She's great. Like I like her as a person a lot, but she wasn't able to really run a strong campaign then. And this seat won by 20 points, right? It was a seat that there was no chance. There was nobody took it seriously. It wasn't a chance to win it. And now we're seeing polling showing a head-to-head 50-50 Republican-Democrat split down the middle for general election.
That's actually a good thing.
And, and none of the candidates are known. In this race, there's no big incumbent, there's no big name, there's nobody who has a lot of name ID or anything like that. So what we're seeing is it's a really interesting test case where voters are getting to just sort of read about everybody and make a decision of who do they want to elect. And I'm really excited about that. And I think that that's where you can see the AI and data center and this whole discussion we're having. It's not bipartisan in that sense of what do Republicans think and what do Democrats think. It's nonpartisan. There is no lane here of anybody having an established prior belief on AI. It just got created by Google in 2017. Like the current generation of this stuff is so new. It's so fast that it's not anybody's fault. It's not they're not paying attention. It's that it's just something we didn't talk about 6 months ago, right? It wasn't on the radar that way for normal folks. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm glad to be able to be a leader in this and take on this issue headstrong and do it the right way that protects people. I mean, the reason I'm running is to protect this place we call home and be able to defend it from what's here and what's happening, both for North Florida, but for the country at large, because we need people who are taking this seriously and not just brushing it off and hoping that the worst doesn't happen, because there's a really, strong basically percentage chance that this goes in the wrong way and the jobs do just decrease and we don't have any safety net and we don't figure out the surveillance piece and we don't figure out the data privacy piece, and this whole thing gets a lot worse before it gets better. And I don't want to have to deal with that. I'd rather just see if we can pull it off the right way early on.
Well, I'd like to have you in there, because if we're going to have a runaway technology, we need to have somebody who knows how to put guardrails up.
That's what I say. It's like everybody doesn't need to be an expert in AI and data centers, but it'd be nice to have somebody up there who is, who can talk about it and not just hope that the right lobbyist gets it in first.
Well, Nick, so we've had a question in the comments, and I've actually been kind of dying to ask you a similar question to it. I mean, so this might end up being a little long-winded, but a couple of years ago, I went up to Tallahassee and I went up to advocate for cannabis legalization, and we were met with a lot of politicians that just were like typically friendly with us, basically saying like it's no longer on our radar right now. Everything that's happening with Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party of Florida has kind of pushed it towards the back. We've got open carry that we've got to fight. We've got all these different, things that they're trying to do that we got to fight. Right. And, and I was sitting here through this conversation kind of thinking like, I wonder what Nick thinks is important now. When when we were hanging out at USF, it was a different time.
Yeah.
We were at one point in our politics, we were like thinking that in the very near future, Americans are going to have free healthcare. We might get free education pretty soon. And now we're in a very different situation, right? So my question is, what are your top priorities? What are your priorities to get back to where we were at, or kind of help us evolve and get out of the situation that Florida is in? And then David Marsh here has a question for you. And in your opinion, why did the Democratic Party lose in 2016 and 2024?
Well, those are big questions and all around. So let me take the first part, which is my priorities on marijuana specifically, just because like that's I know that kind of the point of this whole thing, and on this podcast specifically. So basically, I look at it as the goal is descheduling and legalization. We need to have restorative justice in that, if possible, where we can actually have people who have committed similar crimes and that are now legal. We need to make sure that we're not just making it an industry-owned product, but making sure that we have actually a decentralized regulatory landscape for adult use. Recreational medical can be in there too, but that can't be the only solo lane for that. To get there, we might need to stop through Schedule 3 first and get there, but I really want to make sure that we don't put a flag down in Schedule 3 as the mandate, and then that gets stuck as a success, and then we get stuck in basically always staying this prescription gated product. And so I want to make sure that that's clear. That's my goal. If I was pushing or talking about marijuana legislation, that's why I think the MORE Act is so important, because it solves a lot of those, and I think it's the right way to go. On the kind of bigger picture state government framework of this, I definitely believe in moving as quickly as we can to getting legalization outside of our current regime that's in there. And I'd be willing to negotiate and work around the edges. I don't think purity politics works. I don't think that just saying, well, my end goal that I want, if I don't have everything on that list, then we won't touch it. I think this issue is one of them that has enough things that we can work with, we can negotiate with, but the fundamentals are that it needs to be adult use, and it needs to make sure that it's not owned on the back end by one or two big monopoly companies that have the stack, and we're basically all we buy these products. So those are my two kind of floor level things. And then what was the other piece of that? I know that it was a kind of a long question there. And
why did you're a big data guy? So according to the data you've seen, why did the Democrats lose in 16 and 24?
Okay, so I think that they're two different answers. I mean, those were two very different elections, even if the outcome was similar. In 2016, I think that you had a case of people being very frustrated with the establishment, basically, status quo system that had been running through Clinton, Bush, Obama, going back to probably Reagan, as kind of that order of politics of the big Democrat, big Republican party, and they kind of go back between each other. And I think Trump honestly offered something very new. I remember being excited about Trump, not that I was going to vote for him, but the idea of him early on when he was saying things like, I know the parties are corrupt because I donated money and corrupted them, right? Like, I thought that was a very interesting place to be. I thought that what he was talking about was some, at the systematic level was very interesting. The problem is, which is always true with Trump, his incompetence and corruption and chaos and his bad, basically, ideas on execution ruin all of it. So as he got more and more into politics, he obviously turned more and more into the extreme right and getting into, kind of the white nationalism stuff and a lot of things that are very problematic. And now it's a whole different, scale of problem. But I think that first one I understood more because I got that, like, yeah, it's the Clinton machine versus this new Trump thing. And, he'd been on The Apprentice and people liked him and we'll see what he can do, right? I could understand people taking a risk on him a bit more. 2024 was a different beast. That was much more of, I think, a referendum against the Biden folks and the tragic, just like administration ending there of that debate and what went on. I think that if that debate hadn't happened, you'd have seen a different result. But I think that once that happened and we swapped out candidates, it just looked, the whole thing was bad. And there was a lot of, weird messaging that went on, things that are true or not true. But basically the Democrats could never pick up their feet after that again and really show voters that they're legitimate and that they cared because they had to deal with this huge mess of Biden there at the end. And the policies that they passed, a lot of them were good, but they weren't quick enough, right? They didn't get implemented in time. And so a lot of people hadn't felt anything of what they had passed over 2 or 3 years. And when they finally got to the voting booth, it was easier to say, yeah, let's go back to this guy than what we've got. Now, I think there's a whole, again, different shift that's happened because Trump has gotten in. He's been able to do whatever he's wanted for a year or two now. And people aren't happy with the policies. And that's why you're seeing 20-point shifts in districts like this. That doesn't happen by a bunch of Democrats consolidating up and talking to each other and being happy about the fact that Trump's politically unpopular. I don't think anybody's happy that Trump's politically unpopular. I think that everybody's mad at the prices. They're mad at not being able to get a house. They're mad at gas prices. They're mad at food. They're mad at education. And all of that wraps up into basically the economy and jobs and how much people can afford and what their life is like. And, down to things like marijuana policy and what are we allowed to do as citizens, as people, and what's illegal and what's not in our culture, in our society. And so, it's a long answer of this. It's a very complicated thing. There's no easy answer. I don't have here's the 2 things you've never thought of that solve 2024. But I think that we do need to look a lot more at Trump identified a lot of real problems. He identified a lot of things that were really a problem, and people wanted to talk about those things. And then his solutions were the most incompetent, corrupt, chaotic things we've ever seen. But the Democrats didn't talk about them. They didn't acknowledge that those were problems at a scale or at a way that people could understand. And so while Trump said easy slogans, and I know Democrats aren't great at easy slogans, we do need to have some more substantive solutions to like what to do about these problems. And on my website, again, I don't think everybody needs to go read this, but I spent 10 months at those meet and greets and being a person who's worked professionally in AI. So I've written 90 plus pages of real AI governing documentation on like, what do we need to do? What are the policy solutions here that are either available on the table that other countries or states have tried individually, or just ideas that, kind of the think tank people and myself have thought up as far as just, some idea of a solution to this. I'm not saying they're all the perfect thing or they're all the exact way we need to do it. But right now, the problem is no one has really ideas. A lot of people can identify a lot of the problems going on, but I don't think voters want to hear more problem listing and doom scrolling. They get it. They understand something's wrong. I've spent hours and hours and hours in living rooms with people all over this area and talking to them and just hearing that anxiety and that stress. And as soon as I can give solutions and answers, people change the whole tune. Both sides. It's not a Republican Democratic thing. In Jackson County, I was out there near Marietta, and there was a guy in a Gulf of America t-shirt and a woman with Bernie stickers and People Over Profit sign, both fighting data centers, both out there on the street doing that. And I kind of looked at them and I was like, you guys forgot to hate each other, right? They both came with their partisan gear, right? They came thinking this is a partisan fight. And by the end of it, they were just talking with each other about what to do. It's the most nonpartisan thing I've ever seen. I'm having other candidates in races, Republicans Republican leadership, Republican consultants coming up to me and asking me to meet with them and have coffee and talk about AI because they don't understand it and they don't know how to talk about it and they don't know what to do about it. I'm also having that on the Democratic side, right? This isn't an issue that we have to think about in a partisan frame. We need to think about our frame altogether. We're all going to get hit with this. Doesn't care about party. This doesn't care about your economic status. Unless you're one of the few thousand people in San Francisco that owns this technology and is going to get to decide what to do with it, we're all on the same side right now.
Well, I mean, what you just said can apply to cannabis policy too.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be Democrat or Republican. Right. It's like, why is the longest running war in America, the war on drugs, on Americans? Why are there what we call big cannabis companies raking in millions of dollars a year and paying their bills with weed money while there's people in jail for trying to pay their bills with weed money?
Right.
And we talk about what can you do? You mentioned, one of the criticisms was Democrats couldn't get policy done quick enough, right? So we talked about the MORE Act, but more than that, our friend Carlos here, our mutual friend between me and you, he's looking at possibly losing his entire business based off of these hemp regulations that Congress passed last year over Thanksgiving break when nobody was in town and nobody was paying attention, nobody was watching. I mean, Trump is the first president to legalize cannabis and then make it illegal again federally. It's like you said, there's a lot of incompetence and corruption in all of it. But one of the things that you can do in Congress, and hopefully they do it this November, is pass this hemp legalization bill to re-legalize hemp rather than making it illegal the way it's looking right now. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And Carlos, wanted to go back to you, brother, because I mean, you got a friend here running for Congress that could keep you in business.
Yeah. What? Carlos, you want to step in there? Or you want me to throw an answer out first?
I mean, I have not been able to I just can't even remember what it was named, the Legal Hemp Act or whatever it is.
Right.
But apparently there's been this legislation that's just been introduced. Keno went over it a little bit before the show too, and it essentially gets things to where I could remain in business, but I believe it's going to take a good portion of my products off the shelf the way it's written right now. I believe Delta 8 is not allowed. I believe THCP is not allowed. I believe smoking and vaping wouldn't be allowed anymore. Essentially, it would be edibles, and it would pave the way for me to basically fight big alcohol, essentially, with my business. Because I would be offering edibles in my shop and they would be offering edibles through their distribution channels.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know. It's pretty scary, and hopefully something fucking changes.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it a lot as we can talk about the outcome of these policies, but they weren't thought through policies, right? These weren't things that we went through the committee process and we got to talk about and go up to DC and tell people what was going on and why, and they made an educated decision on rational, hemp and THC and Delta 8, products. What happened here was that they changed the Farm Bill a while back, like 10 years ago or so, basically accidentally created a loophole. From what I understand, it wasn't really intended, but they opened this up because people sort of, or maybe someone snuck it in, but still it wasn't overwhelmingly like intentional for that. But it opened up and made this recreational use in the shops. And so over the decade, that has now built up into a real industry that has real business owners, and like people like the products, they didn't like the products, they like the businesses, they don't like the businesses. There's a lot of discussion there about what's grown out of that. And so then instead of having an actual bill where they say, let's put the recreational, basically, the vape store business weed, what are we going to allow here? What is legal? What's not? Instead, during the shutdown, when they kept saying they wanted a clean bill, clean bill back, don't make any changes. And Democrats threw a bunch of things off the table that they wanted. And they said, no, we'll just do a clean close. And they did, except everybody sort of agreed, apparently, that we'll make this little reform to one line on the bill that made this entire industry all of a sudden either jeopardized or illegal, out the gate. And that's why we're now hitting that deadline in November of when now you have to make the choice state by state, kind of how are you going to enforce this? Is that about right as far as I understand it?
Yeah. But there's also some incompetency in there too, because a lot of Kentucky hemp farmers went to McConnell and said, we have this product that used to do all the fiber And now they figured out there's over 20,000 products. If we can make this legal, we can make our farms still work again.
Yeah.
But no one told them, of course, that, well, yeah, that also includes CBD. That could also include all the other cannabinoids that could possibly come in the plant. Again, not vetting the entire process all the way through kind of created this.
Right.
And so that is why the Farm Bill went forward. It wasn't because that Trump wanted to legalize cannabis. I want to get that out of the way right now. If anybody else who says that to me again, I'm going to slap you.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's what I keep meaning. Is like people act like this is some political maneuver. It's like, no, this was sort of a weird change. And I knew there was a story behind it. I was like, these things don't happen randomly. No one randomly changes the law. So something happened, but it probably was that way. And that makes total sense that the farming community said it was a good thing. And nobody really did the chemical research to understand what that law change unlocked at scale.
And the other part of the incompetence is the fact that nobody created a process for the infrastructure to make those products out of the hemp.
Well,
mills and things of that sort.
There's always been the 0.3 provision in there. So I think there was some idea that what's wrong with weed is the THC. The THC is what gets you high. So there wasn't a lot of research into the fact that there's Delta 8 or THCP or T, and all these different kinds of T. And we just want 0.3% Delta 9 THC. So there was this provision to make sure people weren't getting stoned or whatever. But it was not in any way thought out scientifically. It was just let's keep prohibiting what they like.
Right. And,
yeah.
I mean, that goes
also,
back to why this exists. This whole industry, this hemp industry exists because they put caps on THC. They put caps on licenses. Right. If you don't own enough senators in a state legislature, you're never going to get awarded a license or given priority. Carlos cannot compete with the multi-state operators like TrueLeaf, like CureLeaf, because they have a wider access to products and more clients that they can sell to. And then they're advocating to put people like Carlos out of business at the state level right now with their lobbying dollars. So you got poor Carlos here is fighting the prohibitionists. He's fighting big cannabis and against the established system itself, wanting to just be jerks about it, whether the Commissioner of Agriculture decides he wants to triple inspect Carlos this week or not, just because they think that they can find something to push bad players out the game. I'm glad that he's above board, but that's the issue that small business owners are facing. And this is a $30 billion industry, and it could be so much more if it was just treated with respect, and it's not. There's no respect put on it from the folks in Washington, which is why I think, Nick, having a friend in Washington will make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and I also want to make sure it's this is also investment in the research side, right? We have a lot of really amazing public universities here in Florida that should be running the research so that our politicians aren't surprised that Delta 8 exists or surprised that they have different, psychoactive properties in them. There's probably medical uses we haven't looked at. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. This plant is really an amazing thing. And if we can get back to actually treating it with respect, with actually, investigating what it can do and how it works, but also letting people use it in ways that are safe for people to use, for adults to use. I mean, there is nothing I've seen that shows that adult use is a problem. Now, it does get to be a problem when you're just putting it in a medical lane, and now you have high dosage, you have vape pens, you have things that people really, they're taking a lot. The dosage is very high. It's the same way I keep thinking about it with, if you want to go have a couple of glasses of wine at dinner, or you're doing tequila shots, right? That's a different thing. And I think a lot of people would also be much more appreciative of the industry if it was able to do what it wants to do, which is to have those different scales. So some people want very high dosage medical because it's a real injury and thing that they're dealing with, all the way down to somebody that wants to take a gummy and go dancing, or wants to, take a couple of puffs and go out to dinner with friends or go see a movie. There's multiple sides to this, just like alcohol and almost any other drug, right? There's a lower dose side for normal recreational, and then they might have medical or industrial or other uses of that same chemical in different forms. And I think we need to treat cannabis the same way.
And there's also a connection between AI and cannabis as well, because of the fact that, especially here in Florida, in order for you to be able to buy anything here in Florida, you have to have a medical card. In order to have a medical card, you have to go to a doctor who goes ahead and recommends it for you. And by you doing an interview and taking all your information and putting it into a registry, and then a registry means a digital database that
Yep.
AI could possibly access if the guardrails are not there. We're always worried about the fact that the police are pulling people over on a protectual basis if they know that the driver's license is associated with somebody who has a medical card, or that
Right.
people can lose their jobs because they have a medical card, or people could get kicked off the transplant list for a
Right.
liver because they have a medical card. And these are the kind of bills we've been putting out to Tallahassee for years.
Right. And
But I do see again the possibility that the abuse of this data will happen, and AI will be a part of that. And that's why it would be good to have somebody like you out there who knows how to put in the guardrails and make this technology be closer towards creating that giant computer like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It wasn't called Deep Thought.
Right.
I want to see deep thought.
well, that's
And less deep
I think-
fakes, actually.
I think what you mentioned is a really important aspect to this, which is that it kind of ties it all together, which is this sort of surveillance, if you want to call it that, but more it's this idea that like all of your information can be plugged together and redrawn, and all of a sudden it comes out with a different outcome that maybe looks suspicious or that gets you in trouble or whatever it is. And the key thing here is that previously, if your name was in a database or someone videoed you on a street corner or took a picture of your car, some human had to go back and review that. So it was like this clog of data. There was so much video feeds. And so when a crime was committed, if the police went back and said, okay, now we want to see all the trucks that drove past that corner in this time frame, right? They could do that. And people didn't have a lot of problems with it. AI changes it because it's proactive, right? Because all of a sudden it can just scan everything and say, this truck looks suspicious, right? Or somebody in Atlanta put a mark up looking for this type of truck, and I saw that same type of truck down here in Tallahassee, unrelated, right? It wasn't searched that way, but it can find it. And now all of a sudden people in Tallahassee are being pulled over for a crime in Atlanta, even though nobody approved that, right? There was no warrant, there was no thing. There's a lot here that then you look at the database thing, the same way with voter registration data that they're trying to do with the SAVE Act, right? It's the same kind of thing. You consolidate up all the data into one place or a couple of easy sources, and all of a sudden you can make inferences and make connections and change people's real lives of, are you allowed to register to vote? Are you allowed to drive? Are you allowed to get that job? Are you allowed to get the security clearance? Whatever it is, the loan, all sorts of things based on data that had nothing to do with you, or even maybe wasn't your data, or maybe it was old and expired, or it was just wrong, right? It wasn't true. There's all these things, but we don't have the ability then to go back and tell the person at the government or at the bank or at the job, hey, wait, we used the wrong information. That wasn't me, or that's not that, or there's a more of a story here. Whereas before that never would have just happened because nobody would have thought it was a big enough of a crime or a problem to like go and spend the human hours investigating it. And it wasn't, right? It just wasn't on our priority list. Now everything can be on our priority list. And that's a big worry to me, just because I think that the abuse of that is so easy. I mean, there's just, you now have a database with everybody's picture, all of our medical data, all your, everything. And you're hoping that basically police and the research community and governing people in public office don't abuse that data. Well, I want to make sure that they're forced not to abuse it. I don't want to trust them. I want to make sure we have audit logs of who accessed all that data, when it was used, what it was used for, and how to rectify it for when it's wrong. Somebody can challenge it and say, that wasn't me speeding. That wasn't me in the marijuana database. That wasn't me in my job doing so. Like, we need to be able to prove our innocence. And right now that's not going to happen with the way these are being built and the way they're scaling.
Well, Nick, I got to jump in here and just say, first off, thanks for coming on to the show. It's been great talking to you today. We've got to jump into the news really quickly. But before we do that, go ahead, take a moment, look in the camera, let people know how they can support you and where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I appreciate y'all having me on here. It's fun seeing everybody. And as the little screen on the bottom shows, Team Z for Florida, TEAMZ for FOR Florida.com. You can find us on Facebook. If you're in the Tampa area or the Tallahassee area, ask around. I know a lot of folks in both cities, and I'm glad to give my phone number and chat with people who want to get involved. We've got 20-something days till the election here. So if you can donate to the campaign, if you can support us, we need that help, because, this thing's going to be decided by about 1,000 votes between first place and second place up here in the primary. So we can either have somebody who's a good Democrat. All the Democrats up in this race are strong. I'm proud of everybody running. But if you want somebody who understands the AI piece and wants to really govern this and is on completely, I think the correct side on marijuana policy, then please donate to us. Please give us a call. And if you're in the North Florida area, please vote for us. If you're a Democrat on August 18th and in November, we can go in that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the time, and great seeing everybody.
It's time for the news.
All right, so let's jump into the news here. A lot of great news stories here, but I think at the top of the news and one of the most important things that is pertinent to today's show is that a federal memo is circulating that stipulates cannabis remains off limits to military personnel, even if it has been rescheduled to Schedule 3. Military personnel and civilian Pentagon employees continue to face sanctions for their possession and use of cannabis, despite the changes to the substance federal classification. According to a recent memo issued by Anthony Tata, the Undersecretary of Personnel and Readiness, marijuana use remains punishable under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The memo stimulates that the prohibition continues to apply to state-authored medical cannabis products, despite the U.S. Attorney General recently rescheduling them under federal law. That order is currently being challenged in court. And quote, service members who violate the UCMJ may be held appropriately accountable, including through judicial, non-judicial, or administrative action, as the memo states. A decision on whether to reschedule all botanical cannabis to Schedule 3 under the Controlled Substance Act remains pending. This spring, the U.S. Army eased longstanding rules for applicants with prior marijuana possession convictions, and an Army representative explained that the policy change was necessary because most states now regulate the use of cannabis for either medical or adult use purposes. So, all in all, our men in uniform, men and women in uniform, sorry, no weed for y'all right now, even if it is legal under the current administration. Now, another major issue that I think we have consistently been fighting for over the past several years at the state level, and we still advocating across all levels of government, and this is quite interesting, is that according to the Wall Street Journal, nearly half of employers are no longer screening pre-hires for cannabis. In a recent survey of nearly 1,000 employers, about half are no longer testing for cannabis in their pre-hire process, as the Wall Street Journal reported. Respondents frequently indicated that they ceased testing to increase the prospective applicant pool. Policies that mandate would-be hires to undergo urine screens for past cannabis exposure are holdovers for a bygone era, according to our normal Deputy Director, Paul Armentano. He said that these policies are invasive, discriminatory, and they fail to contribute to a safe work environment. Rather, they target and punish those who engage in a certain lifestyle choices while away from the job. He added that the studies consistently show that employees who consume cannabis during their off hours are no different than their peers, and their workplace performance doesn't differ from that of their coworkers, many of whom consume alcohol, and they do not pose an increased safety risk. In an environment where cannabis use is legal for either medical or adult use in most jurisdictions in this country, it is inherent that employers revisit these out-of-date and ineffective and unduly punitive policies. Employers who drug test most commonly subject workers and pre-hires to urinalysis testing, and the urine screens detect for the presence of inert drug metabolites rather than psychoactive substances themselves. So, you could have consumed cannabis in your bloodstream, a month ago, 2 months ago. Maybe you went to a big concert or a rave, and then, you end up, if they do have urinalysis, you end up testing dirty and you get precluded from a job, fired from a job. It is not scientific to give people urine tests because it does not indicate impairment. And in a society where cannabis is totally illegal, sure, that makes sense. It shouldn't be in your bloodstream. It's an illegal substance. Now it's legal in over 41 states for medical purposes. So drug testing needs to catch up. Employers need to catch up. And it's good to see that from the Wall Street Journal, but we need our public policy to catch up too, because people should not be getting fired from their jobs. And why? Why do you ask? Well, here's an interesting study that's with data published in the Journal of Clinical Therapeutics show that chronic pain patients experience improvement following enrollment in state-authorized medical cannabis programs. State regulators assess the efficacy of state-authorized medical cannabis products in a cohort of more than 6,000 chronic pain patients that were registered in the Minnesota Medical Cannabis Program, and the study participants self-selected which cannabis products to consume, with most patients, 78%, choosing botanical cannabis. That's flower, that's smoking, right? Patients' pain symptoms were assessed at baseline, 4 months, and at 8 months, and the investigators reported the study that over the 6,000 medical cannabis patients qualified for chronic or intractable pain, they found 55% of those patients with moderate to severe scores at baseline were able to improve their lifestyle enjoyment and pain interference in general activity within 4 months of starting medical cannabis. The study's authors concluded medical cannabis patients report reduction in pain, enjoyment, and life scores within 4 months of those first medical cannabis purchase using a variety of medical cannabis products, and future research on medical cannabis should determine the frequency of using different products and administration methods to further investigate how cannabis can be used for effective pain management in patients with chronic pain. The data published in the Journal of the American Medical Association reported that nearly 1 in 3 patients with chronic pain use cannabis as an analgesic agent, and many of those who do substitute it in place of opioids. Now, the next news story kind of reads right into that. And it found that an analysis in the Substance Use and Addiction Journal that women frequently substitute or supplement their use of prescription antidepressants with legal cannabis products. Canadian researchers assessed trends in adults' use of cannabis and antidepressants prior to and following nationwide cannabis legalization. Canada legalized retail cannabis sales for those 18 and older back in 2018, and they reported that the changes in cannabis use relative to antidepressant use vary significantly between females and males after legalization. The relative risk for exclusive use of cannabis among females was about 2 times higher than antidepressant use during the post-legalization period compared to the pre-legalization period. However, this was not evident among males during the same period. These findings suggest that the increased availability of legal cannabis may be associated with changes in antidepressant use patterns at the population level, particularly among females. Now, people like using cannabis, okay? They like to use it for medical reasons. Sometimes they just want to use it to relax. They, in the grand scheme of things, we talked about medical versus adult use on the show today. But one thing that does hit everyone is, and this is according to data that's been published in the Journal of Health Economics, is that raising taxes on state legal cannabis products drives a significant percentage of consumers back to the unregulated marketplace, back to the legacy market. And I think that is something that we've seen in numerous states. And we have these major issues here across the country where folks are going back to the legacy market from legal markets because it's just too much. Investigators that were affiliated with the University of Ohio State University evaluated purchasing behaviors among a cohort of over 1,500 adult cannabis consumers. And they reported that tax increases discouraged many consumers from patronizing the legal cannabis market, while increases in prices of legal products significantly reduce their consumption of state legal products. 89% of this reduction may be offset by consumers switching to illegal or legacy market products. Increasing prices through taxes on legal products will drive consumption to the legacy market. Look, I mean, your weed dealer doesn't charge you taxes, and if you're going to get an eighth from the your local dealer, it's going to be a lot easier than paying $60-$70 plus taxes on an eighth at the various states. And as states go through these issues with the federal government and funding, they're trying to plug their budget holes without raising taxes on everyone else, and cannabis taxes seem to be one of those things. And last year, lawmakers in several states, including Maine, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, passed legislation that imposed significant cannabis-related tax hikes. By contrast, the legislative effort led by California NORML successfully rolled back marijuana-related taxes in that state. And earlier this year, members of the D.C. City Council also rejected a budget proposal that sought to significantly raise sales taxes on retail cannabis purchases. Look, in the grand scheme of things, we're still not there when we look at legalization. As a matter of fact, they're trying to roll back legalization in some states that we thought were well decided, that were not battlegrounds. A proposal, and this is big news coming out of Massachusetts, a proposal repealing key elements of Massachusetts' voter-approved marijuana legalization law will appear on the November ballot, as confirmed by state officials. The measure is called an Act to Restore a Sensible Marijuana Policy, also known as Question 8. And it seeks to repeal a decade-old law permitting adults to home cultivate marijuana and regulate adult use retail cannabis market sales, among other changes. Financing for the campaign has come entirely out of one single out-of-state special interest group. So when we talk about smart approaches to marijuana and we talk about them being one of the leading prohibitionist groups, you need to pay attention, because they are trying to fight us and keep us off balance in these various states. Now, according to statewide polling, 63% of Massachusetts voter, including strong majorities of Democrats, about 74%, and 69% of independents, opposed the ballot question, with just 20% of respondents expressed support for the measure. All in all, there's no buyer's remorse among Massachusetts voters when it comes to legalizing cannabis. And this will be made clear this November. But if we're having to fight in these states where we thought were safe, that means we're not paying attention to these states that are battlegrounds. And so it is vitally important that you pay attention to the right candidates that you're electing, that we pay attention to what we're doing in the grand scheme of things when it comes to voting. Vote by mail ballots are already arrived. I know I got mine here in Florida. So if you're a Florida voter who votes by mail, great. If you typically vote by mail and you haven't seen your ballot yet, understand that Ron DeSantis signed a law that says you got to request it each and every election for the sake of election security. So that being said, the vote by mail request deadline is still out there. You can still get a vote by mail ballot right now through the end of the month. So go on to your local supervisor of elections, check them out, and request a vote by mail ballot. And we're in the primary season right now. August 18th is the party primaries. So if you're registered with a political party, all right, whether that be the Republican Party of Florida, the Democratic Party of Florida, Libertarian Party, any of the political parties, the primaries are going down right now. All the candidates that we're inviting onto the show, the vast majority of them are in contested primaries. And so I'm pretty excited to see some of the great folks that we have coming up on the horizon. Next week, we're going to have a state house candidate here in the Tampa Bay area, Robin Lockett, who's a friend of the show, who's been on previously when she ran for city council. And we're going to have Elijah Manley, who is running down in South Florida in District 20 in a heated three-way race, behind Uncle Luke, Luther Campbell, and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So I'm pretty excited to have both Robin and Elijah Manley coming us on the show next week. And then, of course, big news. Hold your calendar, because the weekend before the primary, that is August 16th, we got the candidate for United States Senate, Angie Nixon, who's going to be jumping in the rotation here with us. So we got a lot of great candidates up on the horizon running for various offices, whether it's State House, State Senate. We've had a member of someone running for United States Congress today and United States Senator. If you're a major candidate and you're on the campaign trail and you're not jumping into the rotation, what are you doing with your life and your campaign? So reach out to Gary, hit us up here, visit us at suncoastnormal.org, and let the voters know, let the members of Suncoast Normal and Normal know that you're down with us, that you're willing to jump in the rotation and have a serious talk about public policy in regards to cannabis. And fellas, that's the normal news.
And Matt, the welder, by the way, give me a call, and then I will tell you where your dog is located. Okay, just
Gary,
so you
stop
know.
kidnapping people's dogs.
Don't kidnap.
I sure hope I get the right
dog.
one. I don't know.
Don't kidnap Matt's dog. Please don't do that.
Well,
So Gary, I'm curious to ask what you think, because like me and Kenna both have like preconceived notions of Nick. What do you think about Nick? What do you think about his campaign? And
I actually kind of like it. I mean, I
like
like it. I mean, AI scares the hell out of me, because I know what it has for capacity for good and capacity for evil. And it's important that somebody knows how to regulate it in a manner that is beneficial to the public at large. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
Burn it down. Burn it all down. Sarah Connor was right.
You are such a damn anarchist.
What I don't know if he's still on, but he can come back if he wants to. But
No, I think we put him in the backstage.
I think didn't he say like at the beginning of the whole thing that he was like he helped like some cities and counties put moratoriums down on AI?
Well, I've been working on that on my end. I know Nick has definitely been advising folks. All in all, AI is a scary thought. There's a lot to be said as to how our data is going to be used and what it means for us in the future. I mean, again, especially around law enforcement. Again, if humans make laws, humans should be enforcing laws in my book.
I think he wants to come back on.
And it looks like Nick may want to say some things on that. So, if y'all have the opportunity, visit Nick's website, check him out. All in all, team, stay involved, stay woke. It's become a 4-letter word in so many ways. It is a 4-letter word, right?
Yeah, I mean that is exactly 4 letters. Yes.
Yes, exactly. But I would say this much: you can do so much more by helping out, by becoming a member of Suncoast Normal, getting involved in your local politics, get involved and register to vote, get involved in our organization, meet like-minded folks, and we can win. We can win real policy changes to help everyday folks, and I think it's important that you do that. So, of course, visit suncoastnormal.org to become a member and hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us on YouTube. Check out our past episodes. We had Nick this week. We got some great folks coming up, but we've had members of Congress, city members of Congress on the show. We've had folks, jumping out in their first campaigns and winning big after jumping in the rotation. And it's because of you, the listeners and viewers, who continue to support us each and every week on everything we got going on. And we truly do appreciate that. So, but again, we can't do this without you all. So hit that like and subscribe button. That's the least you can do, and jump into rotation with Suncoast Normal each and every Sunday.
And it's nice to be part of a nonpartisan group like this. I mean, we got 3 different viewpoints here. Chris, as you know, is quasi-communist Democrat, and Carlos is
offensive. Gary, I'm no goddamn communist.
And Carlos is quasi-fascist Republican, and I'm just screwed as far as primaries are concerned, independent, because we don't have open primaries. So
you're a communist.
Definitely. If anybody's a commie, it's Gary.
That's why I'm a communist fascist, and I stand by what I did.
No. You're like, typically when I hear people say that they're in the middle, I typically think that they're like fascist Nazis. Because honestly, people saying that they're in the middle are just kind of alt-right Republican now. But now that whenever I hear Gary say that, he's on the other side of he's a communist. Absolutely does not even realize it. Is just out here just weighing in with all the commies. And yeah, that's it.
Gary, I gotta say, man, I love you to death, but you are the absolute worst for setting people up for failure sometimes. This administration is trying to put communists in Guantanamo Bay. Why would you ever call me a communist on social media, on the internet, Gary? Why?
I said quasi-communist. You have to listen to all the words.
Oh, you're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me. Look, all in all, look, we continue to fight the powers that be. That's going to make us enemies on all sides, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with challenging Democrats on their positions of being prohibitionists. I'm okay with sticking it to Republicans who think the status quo is just fine. I am okay with taking on a corrupt system because it is, which is why we need to release all the weed prisoners. We need to legalize it.
At the same time, I don't want to be the Republican on the show, guys. I'll just that's got really negative connotations. I changed party affiliation just so I could do the Matt the Welder thing in the primaries, and I'll be back.
This is not your first time. You changed party affiliation to vote for Bernie in 2016, right?
Well, yeah, but
I don't know if I lost you or you lost me. I think you lost me.